I'm sure you've heard Muslims say, oh, white men still commit more rapes than Pakistani men. This claim comes from the Home Office report, which I will get into in a moment because, let's admit it, 99% of the people making this claim haven't read the report. I have. But most people propagating this claim that the Home Office report admits grooming gangs are not a Muslim problem and that the study finds no credible evidence for a far-right stereotype that has spread widely in the media, mostly rely on a Guardian article written by Ella Cockburn and Waqas Tufail. Let me quote, "The 2-year study by the Home Office makes very clear that there are no grounds for asserting that Muslims or Pakistani heritage men are disproportionately engaged in such crimes. In citing our research, it confirmed the unreliability of the Quilliam claim that 84% of the grooming gang offenders were of Asian heritage. It's a technical lie, but a lie nonetheless. There is no evidence that grooming gang offenders were mostly Muslims or Pakistanis because they dismissed a lot of evidence. The report acknowledges that there are challenges with the data and it advises against drawing definitive conclusions. For example, some studies suggest an overrepresentation of Black and Asian offenders relative to the demographics of the national populations. However, it is not possible to conclude that this is representative of all group-based CSE offending, CSE being child sex exploitation. So what are the challenges? Firstly, some incidents had no ethnicity data recorded. Secondly, there is an issue with the collection of ethnic data, as the police often input it instead of allowing the offender to self-report. Aside from occasional mistakes, this wouldn't have had much impact. There were at least 3 significant data collection efforts, and in all of them, Asians were overrepresented. Let me read from the report about this challenge. Police collected data on ethnicity using broad categories, and it required the police to assign an ethnicity rather than it being self-reported by offenders. They discarded a lot of data in the report because it was police recorded rather than self-reported by the offenders. That's one of the main reasons much of the data was labeled as unreliable, leading to the conclusion of no evidence found. For example, in one instance, Child Exploitation Online Protection (CEOP) gathered data in 2011. In more than half the cases, there was no ethnicity data, but from what remained, 38% were white, while 28% were Asian. This is clear overrepresentation. Let me read from the report. 2,300 possible offenders, but approximately 1,100 were excluded from analysis due to a lack of basic information. In the remaining 1,200 cases, ethnicity data was unknown for 38% of them. Where data was available, 30% of offenders were white, while 28% were Asian. Okay, maybe that wasn't enough. 2 years later, let's try that again. And it gets worse. In 2013, CEOP undertook a second piece of work in this space. Data was requested from all police forces in England and Wales on contact CSA, and responses were received from 31. So of the 52 groups where the data provided was usable, half of the groups consisted of all Asian offenders. 11 were all white offenders, 4 were all Black, and 2 were exclusively Arab. There were 9 groups where offenders came from a mix of ethnic backgrounds. So looking at the offenders across all groups, of the 306 offenders, 75% were Asian. However, as with CEOP 2011, these figures should be treated with caution due to the amount of missing data. That damn missing data. They're hiding behind a mere technicality. Unless you're telling me that only white people's data is somehow magically not collected and every single Asian man's ethnicity is recorded, it's pretty clear that out of a population of 7%, they are clearly overrepresented. I have a whole thread in this Home Office report, which I'll link below, but I have no doubt in my mind that Muslim men of Pakistani heritage are massively overrepresented in grooming gangs, and not just in Rotherham. The investigation is ongoing. Only 20 people have been convicted so far in Rotherham, despite the number of victims being at least 1,500. The Muslim community keeps quoting this Guardian article, which sources its information from this Home Office report I've just shown you. Their entire argument is built on the fact that the police reported the offender's ethnicity rather than the offender's self-reporting it. The missing data they talk about should affect everyone equally. It cannot make one group worse than it is and the other better than it is. Now let's read the Guardian headline again now that you understand what's written in the report. Home Office report has concluded that there is no credible evidence that any one ethnic group is overrepresented in cases of child sexual exploitation. You see, they fooled you with a mere technicality. And this report was released under the Tories government. The police didn't pursue these offenders because they were afraid of being labelled as racist. The Home Office issues a report and claims there is no credible evidence when in reality they dismissed evidence on a technicality. And despite all of that, CEOP's data collection efforts both in 2011 and 2013 across England and Wales show Muslims were clearly overrepresented. 28% in CEOP's 2011 report and 50% in CEOP's 2013 report. Moreover, they didn't consider Skidmore Police's claims that ethnic minorities were massively overrepresented. This seems like a conspiracy. I suggest you read my thread, or better yet, read the report itself, which I'll link below. So I hope you understand what they mean by credible when they say there is no credible evidence that Pakistani men are overrepresented in grooming gangs. As I said, this video is probably going to get demonetized or worse, get taken down.